The brain actually doesn't know the difference or can't tell the difference between what you're imagining and what you're actually doing. I would sit with patients while they were getting chemo treatments and infusions, and I would take them through a visual imagery of actually imagining the treatment killing in an aggressive way the cancer cells. And there's a lot of research behind that. Being able to visualize your body working with whatever the treatment is, or sort of imagining it do what you want it to do, is not only powerful for the brain and helps you get through something that is really tough, and there's a lot of significance in that, but also it physically can change the way your cells receive the chemistry.
Yeah. Most of us were taught that optimism means staying upbeat, thinking good thoughts, and pushing away anything painful or uncomfortable. But that version of optimism is unrealistic, emotionally draining, and often leaves us feeling like we are failing at life.
Our modern society and modern world, constantly and chronically imagining worst case scenario and ruminating about that is not helpful to our survival anymore. And so actually the opposite is necessary for thriving. And there's been a ton of research done on people that score higher on optimism levels. They get sick less often. They bounce back from common respiratory viruses very quickly. Optimistic people are more productive. They're more desirable and likable. So across the board, there is just so many reasons. And it's not just like happiness. It's very particular to optimism.
My guest today, Dr. Deepika Chopra, known as the Optimism Doctor, has spent more than a decade studying what optimism really is. Her new book, The Power of Real Optimism, breaks down the science behind resilience, joy, emotional strength, and the habits that help us stay grounded when life feels anything but easy.
People can want something 10 out of 10. They can want. But their expectation, do you expect this is actually going to happen, is like a 4. And unless we do the work to close that gap of the 10 and the 4, your brain is probably not working for you to get there with the solutions. You don't always get what you want, but you most likely always get what you expect.
Oh my gosh.
And we can change the expectation, and one of the best ways is through visual imagery.
Wow.
Because once your brain has seen something, it now understands that it's a possibility.
In this conversation, we talk about why toxic positivity makes stress worse, how awe and micro habits calm an overwhelmed mind, and why naming your emotions honestly is one of the strongest psychological tools you have. Are some brains born more pre-wired for negativity and more resistant to optimism than others?
Great question. I think a lot of people
Okay, before we jump in, quick health check. Are you subscribed yet? You'd be surprised how many people forget the one click that actually helps them feel better every week. Go ahead, hit it. Around here, we turn science into self-care you can actually use. Let's get started. Okay, Dr. Chopra, you're here, and you're going to try to teach us about optimism. Are we not optimistic enough?
Tricky question. I think optimism really gets sort of a interesting definition a lot, and it's wrong. I think it's defined incorrectly all the time. So I think what's interesting about that is I think a lot of people think they're not optimistic, but when they learn what real optimism is, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I guess I am sort of more optimistic than I thought. But past that, I think that we could always be more optimistic. And there is, and I'm sure you know this, but there is just plethora of research to show why being optimistic is so beneficial. Not just, I think we obviously can think about emotionally why that makes sense, but the part that's like astounding is physically and biologically why optimism is so important for not only living a long time, but thriving.
So, optimism, when I hear that word, I start thinking like, and please don't roll your eyes at this.
Oh,
but
no,
I
I've
start
heard it all.
thinking, I start thinking like positive vibes only,
Yep.
or like, I'm going to protect my peace, or,
Mhm.
like,
Glass half
okay,
full,
exactly. Or
rose
like,
colored
we're
glasses.
going to like manifest this,
Oh, yeah.
like those are the things that I hear. What are we talking about? The same thing?
Not really.
Okay. I had a feeling.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. So whenever I'm speaking to like a really large group of people, I always love to start and ask people like, what's the first word that comes to your mind when you think about optimism? And of course, like, it makes a lot of sense. You're not alone. It's like a resounding roar of like positivity,
Yeah,
And
definitely.
I think that it's surprising to people when they are hearing from someone that sort of specializes in optimism or known as the optimism doctor to say that positivity is probably like maybe word 3 or 4 on my
Mm.
list. And yes, they have a lot in common. I kind of like to think of them as like cousins. But the 2 words that come to mind very strongly for me when I think about this notion and idea of optimism is resiliency and curiosity.
Hmm.
And those are stronger sort of synonyms with optimism than positivity is.
So resiliency and curiosity. Okay, I'm going to
Yes.
ask a non-opt. I am an optimist, but I'm going to pretend like I'm not. But I'm going to ask a non-optimist, pessimistic question. Like, why do we need to care
Yeah.
about optimism?
I
Why does it matter in the health context?
Yep.
Why does it matter in the community or the family world? We have all studied those studies, right? That say that we have primate brains
Yep.
that are wired for
Yep.
negativity. Um, what got you into this? Why do you care about us being resilient and curious?
So much there. Number 1, I think it's so interesting from an evolutionary standpoint. We are wired to be more pessimistic. And that worked for us a very, very long time ago. Our ancestors were running away from saber-toothed tigers. And the ones that got away are the ones that were constantly ruminating over worst case scenario. And they applied that, they got away, and then they survived, and then they passed that down and so on. And right now, we still live in a world where there are predators. We won't talk about who they are, what they look
Yes.
like, but they look very different than saber-toothed tigers.
Right.
And what we do know is in our modern society and modern world, constantly and chronically imagining worst case scenario and ruminating about that is not helpful to our survival anymore. And
Mm.
so actually the opposite is necessary for thriving. And there's been a ton of research done on people that score higher on optimism levels. They get sick less often. They bounce back from common respiratory viruses very quickly. They have much lower cardiovascular issues and
Mhm.
greater cardiovascular health. This one's really big, but they hold much more sort of rich connections and friendships and relationships. And of course, the Harvard study that came out recently, the longitudinal study that was
Yeah.
so powerful on sort of what is the one predicting factor that you can tell when someone's going to be happy later in life. And it all came back to their quality of relationships and
Mm.
connection.
Mhm.
Optimistic people are more productive. They they're more desirable and likable, and so that goes with the connection, and that also goes with it helps with production as well. Um, so across the board, there is just a so many reasons, and it's not just like happiness. It's very particular to optimism, and I think I sort of glossed over, but the true definition of optimism is it's someone that is not devoid of reality. I think we think that a lot, like ignorance is bliss. But the true definition of someone who is optimistic is someone who is keenly and very mindfully aware of the setbacks and the roadblocks and the less than ideal situations. But the caveat is they see those things as temporary
Mm.
and that they innately know that they have the ability to persevere through those setbacks solely based on their own history of resiliency.
Wow. So you mentioned that the early part before we were talking that the early part of your career was psych-oncology, correct?
Yeah, there's a big portion of my career in psycho-oncology.
So tell us a little bit about that field and how the seeds of this work really began, because I think I remember even maybe just recently, like a month ago, seeing a study around, the people that do well with cancer, who have good outcomes, are people that are typically optimistic.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if that's sort of where
Mhm.
where this kind of planted for you. So maybe fill us in on that leg of
Yeah.
what you were going through.
I mean, I did my practicum and my internship and also one of my fellowships, in that space,
Mhm.
and it was sort of interesting because it sounds like it makes sense now, but at the time, this was a while back, I feel like not a lot of people were talking about this idea of optimism. I think we were just really getting into, at least psychologically, the idea of being in the present. So
Mhm.
CBT focuses cognitive behavioral,
Right.
yeah. Therapy focuses a lot on the present, which most of my foundation comes from, and I truly believe in that. But at the very same time, I was learning so much about the brain, and everything I was learning about the brain was pointing towards the brain being this anticipatory organ.
Mhm.
So it's constantly acting and sort of behaving in ways of the future. And it was interesting to me. So that's like 5 seconds from now, a minute from now, 5 months from now, anything that is in the future, that's how our brains work. And it was interesting that we weren't really, or I wasn't being taught anything modality wise and intervention wise to work with people on what they were thinking or expecting to happen in their future, even if it was minutes from now. And when you really think about it, someone feels their emotion. They feel the way they feel because they have made a decision or an idea about how something will go or occur. And so at the very same time, I was working, in the oncology space and with people that were diagnosed with cancer and their families. And
Yeah.
it seemed like a strange place to talk about optimism because there was a lot to not be so hopeful about.
Right.
But yes, you're right. There's actually tons of research done that it actually changes outcomes. And I mean, the same thing is true for people that have gone through any sort of really, really traumatic experience. One of the guests on my previous podcast was one of the oldest Holocaust survivors.
Mm.
And something that was so evident in her experience, even as a little girl during that time, she was so optimistic. She woke up every morning and she thought about her future and
Wow.
visualized what her future might be, even though her circumstances around her and most people around her were keenly sort of aware of the very reality they were living. And that's what kept her going.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I don't know if I answered your
Yeah,
question
yeah, yeah.
altogether, but it was an interesting, and I think I thought during that time I was starting to utilize some sort of more, I guess, innovative modalities. And I had really amazing supervisors who were sort of like, sure, you're studying this or you're kind of going down this avenue. You can try this out on our population. And I think after a couple years of it, I was like, if these things are so evidently working in this population during this very traumatic time, imagine also what these sort of, tools could do for other people.
What were some of the things that were working?
So, one thing that is sort of for me that goes hand in hand with actually increasing someone's optimism is the idea of sensory based visual imagery.
Mm.
And so it's the idea that I'm sure everyone's heard of this idea of visualization, but I don't think a lot of people know there's real science behind it.
Right.
And the interesting thing is our brain has mirror neurons, and the brain actually doesn't know the difference or can't tell the difference between what you're imagining, if you're really imagining it using all your senses, and what you're actually doing.
Hmm.
So people that like watch that show Dancing with the Stars
Yeah.
or something, or
Yeah.
watch people dancing,
Yeah.
your brain is firing, the mirror neurons are firing the same way as if they would be dancing. And so a
Wait,
lot
I
of
can
times,
sing then?
yeah, you can sing,
Oh,
or your brain
great.
thinks you can sing if
Right.
you're watching someone
Right.
sing and you're putting yourself sort of in there or you're visualizing yourself singing. That's like the piece.
Mm.
And so this was used a lot in sports psychology. So there's a ton of research on this. Like we know that your body has a limited ability to practice. And so sometimes, these really elite athletes, you have to tap into the mental practice. And
Mm.
that's a really big part of sports psychology. And so taking the research from there and applying it to, the population that maybe is not an elite athlete,
Right.
it's just as powerful. And so the part for me that's so interesting is so a lot of times, of course, we all know we have self limiting beliefs
Right.
and we have come up with these sort of core beliefs about ourselves that in rational sort of setting, we can all say, like, this is a really crappy belief I have about myself. And I know rationally it's not helping me get
Mhm.
to where I wanna go.
Mm.
But, like, you're stuck with how I mean, maybe it's been 40 plus years that you have collected all this evidence to make that belief true. And so my issue with kinda what happens next in a lot of the, like, somewhat new age modalities is someone might tell you to just repeat an affirmation.
Right.
And all the evidence shows that, unfortunately, like, if you don't truly believe the affirmation you're saying, it will just work the opposite and negatively for you. And not only now have you said something you don't believe, your brain then, which is a very powerful organ,
Right.
comes back to you in that moment and starts flipping through, like, how dumb that you just said that. I'm going to give you 35 examples why that's not true. And now you feel shame on top of it. And so the true thing really there is, how can we chip away at someone's core belief that's not working for them and collect more evidence for them to show that something better for them is possible? Your brain only actually starts to put forth the energy and the executive functioning in, the prefrontal cortex to
Mhm.
start coming up with solutions if it thinks that what you want is possible.
But how do you do so talk to us then about the sensory
Yeah.
visualization because, I have a mindfulness practice, I
Yep.
journal, I do
Yep.
these things. How do I know I'm doing them to the point that my brain actually believes that the things I'm writing and saying
Are really
are
true.
really true?
So one of the best ways, there's a couple different ways, but one of the best ways, I think because I come from the CBT background,
Yeah.
I love evidence-based and I love measurable things. I
Okay.
measure everything.
Okay.
1 out of 10,
Okay.
simple measurement. So if you are going to write something, say something, repeat something, brain loves repetition. I would ask myself and rate, how much do I actually believe this from 1 to 10? Or how likely is this to actually, how much do I believe this is going to occur, 1 to 10? And the difference there is, a lot of people can want something 10 out of 10. They can want, but their expectation, do you expect this is actually going to happen, is like a 4. And
Mm.
unless we do the work to close that gap of the 10 and the 4, your brain is probably not working for you to get there with the solutions. And so the big takeaway is sort of like, you don't always get what you want, but you most likely always get what you expect.
Oh my
And we can
gosh.
change the expectation. And one of the best ways is through visual imagery.
Wow.
Because once your brain has seen something, it now understands that it's a possibility. And the more you visualize it and use all the senses, because that's a powerful part of turning that part on in the brain and the mirror neurons, it's seen it now. It's seen yourself as it now. And it now believes it is closer of a possibility than you just saying, I really want a great relationship, or
Mm.
I want this promotion. I mean, you could want that, but based on your experience of the last 20 years and whatever your setbacks are or your core beliefs, many times I will sit down with someone and they are like, that's what I truly want. And I'm like, how likely do you think that is to happen for you? And they're like, well,
So how do we change our
so
expectations?
a lot of it is collecting evidence. I believe we are all, what the brain loves is to be a detective. We've already been doing that. It's naturally what we do. We
Like
collect
sifting and
evidence. Yes.
sorting and yeah. Yeah.
And we have a bunch of cognitive biases. So, things that help us, to sort of make shortcuts, and we need those. But oftentimes they're putting us in this automatic, which we need. But if those go unchecked, a lot of times they're working against you. So you might, be someone that has this core belief that, you're not very likable. I'm unlikable. And you might go to a social setting like a party, and someone might say to you, like, wow, like, I really thought that story you told was, like, so funny. Like, you're
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
And then, someone else might say to you another type of compliment. And then someone else might come up to you and just be like, huh, I didn't get that. And based on your core belief, you probably put value on that third comment so much more than you do any of the other comments. And you leave and you collect the evidence you collected from that night was, gosh, I can't tell a great story. Nobody
Mm.
got it.
Mhm.
Even though there was evidence there, you just weren't programmed to receive it. That was actually telling you something different. So it's
Gotcha.
about intentionally challenging yourself.
Putting you in situations
Yeah,
to be able to collect better evidence.
collect better evidence. It's there. It's sort of like, sometimes I work with a client and I'll say, I want you to go home, and all day tomorrow, I want you to think about the color red.
Mhm.
Just think about red. And then come back and tell me, like, what that was like. And they may come back and tell me or shoot me a quick email and be like, oh my gosh, like, I saw 15 red cars. Like, 4 people when I was walking to work were wearing red. And it's not because I paid them to wear red that
Right,
day or
right.
anything. They've always been there. It's just what you were intentionally choosing to be attuned to. And so it's sort of a proof that there is other evidence out there. You're not tuned into that radio station.
Mm,
And you can tune into a different radio station. It takes work and intention and practice. But once you do and you tune into whatever that radio station is, you start collecting evidence that you want to collect. Your brain is more likely to now seek that out because it's seen it. It's now programmed it. It's going to create another shortcut. So lots to be done there. For
yeah.
someone that is stuck,
Right.
which I talk about in one of the chapters in this book, I was sitting across after I'd done this a bunch of times. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm onto something here.
Mhm, mhm.
So, I'd ask the person in front of me to sort of like visualize, what it is that they really wanted. And this particular patient of mine at the time was super stuck, had a very, very rigid core belief about himself. And he really wanted to be in a loving, respectful relationship. And when I had asked him to imagine that, I was not expecting this, but I asked him, why don't you imagine what it's like to be, in this relationship? And he just looked at me and he laughed. And he just was like, literally could not stop laughing. And I was like, he's like, how could you ever expect me to imagine that? That is so unlikely. And he just could not, he couldn't go there cognitively yet. And so I tried a different approach where I was like, okay, this is not going to work this simply for everyone. Depends how deep this core belief is.
Right.
And so I sort of, and I say this I wish there was a better way to say this. Maybe I'll come up with a better way to say this over time, but I sort of positively manipulated him. Sometimes we have to do these things that are for the best intentions, but
Mhm,
sort of a manipulation.
mhm.
And instead of asking him to visualize it, I asked him a very direct question. And I said, who's the first person that you're going to tell when you are in this loving long term relationship? And he immediately said, my mom.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, where are you when you're telling your mom? And he could go there. I'm in her room. I'm doing this. What does it smell like? What does it sound like? What is she wearing? What's around you? Do you hear any sounds? And so now we've created a visualization of him talking about this life that he's currently in, like in his imagination. And now it becomes closer to a possibility.
Mm,
So he's opened a window
gotcha.
and then we start from there.
Ah, so interesting.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to do this on your own,
Hmm.
or well, let's ask that question first. Do you recommend walking through the sensory visualization exercise on your own?
Yeah, I actually again, it's one of the chapters in the book, and I
Okay.
was like, I really want to break this down so that someone at home can do this. Of course, there are many caveats, and oftentimes when you are going through something or there is something very deep seated, I think there's no better way than to work with a professional.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of science behind this. And so for me, this work is so exciting. There's like science behind when you should use third person visual imagery, when
Oh
you
my
should use first person.
gosh.
I mean, it's really, really exciting and interesting. And I nerd out about it. And so I
Yeah.
would always say there is a way to start this practice and to continue to repeat it. Again, the brain loves repetition. And there is a more simple sort of format that you can always start. And if you want to go deeper into it, I think finding someone that specializes in sensory based visual imagery and that's something that I'm super passionate about and I love doing, is probably really helpful.
Let's go into some specific examples. I'm just curious. So you've been given a diagnosis: cancer, diabetes, heart disease,
Mhm,
autoimmune disease. You've been told that the disease is pretty advanced
mhm,
and here are your three medications that you need to take to reverse the disease. In the case of cancer, the usual spouting of
mhm,
statistics, you've got a 1 in 4 chance to
mhm.
survive. What works for that patient?
So I wanna be clear that, like, all of this stuff is not, you know, in place of treatment.
Right.
It's very much supplemental and adjunctive, and a lot of times it can help, I think, the patient do better with treatment, whether that
Right.
is actually calming the nervous system down and better receiving, or whether that's actually just helping a patient be more compliant. And that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
So for me, a lot of the work, which sounds also, a lot of this was counterintuitive at first for me. A lot of the work in visual imagery I did when I was in the oncology world is I would sit with patients while they were getting chemo treatments and infusions, and I would take them through a visual imagery of actually imagining the treatment killing in an aggressive way the cancer cells.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of research behind that. And so it helped to sort of, a lot of people obviously coming in, and I can completely understand why, you look at your treatment of chemo as like a really awful thing.
Right.
It's
Right.
toxic
Yeah.
and you don't want to do that. But at the same time, it is your best chance, a best case scenario, in addition to other things. But chemo is a huge part of this, or surgery, for
Mhm.
example. No one's excited about the surgery. It's awful. But a lot of times it's what's life saving.
Right.
And so being able to visualize your body working with whatever the treatment is, or sort of imagining it do what you want it to do, is not only powerful for the brain and helps you get through something that is really tough, and there's a lot of significance in that, as you
Mhm.
you must know, but also it physically can change the way your
The
cells receive the
chemistry. Yeah.
chemistry.
Yeah.
So we know that even with things like when you get a blood draw, if you're tense and you are, which by the way is me, if you're super tense, it makes it really hard to find a vein.
Mm.
Right? If you're holding your breath, how many times, and I can talk about this because I have needle phobia,
Yeah.
but actually exhaling when the needle comes in, or exhaling when you are about to have something painful happen, not only is there to sort of just be like, hey, take a deep breath, and it like sort of helps to relax your brain. It actually helps to relax the muscle and the vein there, and it opens that up and it relaxes your whole nervous system.
Mm.
And in some ways, like, I have used it, and when I exhale, I actually don't feel the
Right.
pain.
Right.
But when you tense something, so there's a lot of reasons why it doesn't change the circumstance. That's clear. Like,
Yeah.
this is not about
Are you gonna
I love magical thinking, but this
Right.
is not necessarily what we're talking
Magic.
about. It's
Right.
not magic,
Right.
but, I remember going through tons of, over and over visual imageries with patients while they were receiving chemo, and it's very it's very specific, and
Mhm.
it's actually the more, like, aggressive you can imagine, like tiny soldiers coming in and, you know, shooting the cells or
Yeah.
whatever it is, you start to learn with someone what they
Is that the
makes
primary tool, the sensory visualization? Is that the primary tool for this idea around optimism?
I wouldn't say it's the only tool, there's many tools, it's why I have this thing called Things Are Looking Up, the deck of cards. There's
Mhm.
52 different
Mhm.
science-based sort of prompts that are more like you can just pick one up and
Yeah.
they're less than, like, 15 seconds, and they actually have a science-based prompt. The good news is there's so much you can do. Optimism's muscle, that's what I like to say. Optimism is a muscle, and we have to work it out in order to gain to build it.
Yeah.
And so there's many different ways. Sensory-based visual imagery is one of, I would say, the most significant and powerful ways to sort of work with a really self-limiting deep core belief
Mm.
that is in the way of you feeling hopeful.
What about someone who wants financial success? Like, I wanna
Mhm.
be a billionaire,
Mhm.
or you talked about the
Mhm.
partnered, analogy. Like,
Yeah.
does does
Yeah.
what they do different than what the patient needs to do?
It works in the same way in the sense that if you can be someone that's like, "I wanna be a billionaire." Well, that's wonderful. I ask a lot of people in a large group, and I say, "How many of you guys wanna win the lottery?" And, the question is, "Do you want to win the
Right.
lottery?" Most people will raise their hand and be like, "Of course I wanna win the lottery."
Right.
And then all those people, I have them keep their hands up, and I'm like, "Okay, keep your hand up if you bought a lotto ticket today." And you will very promptly see everyone's hands go down. And
Mm.
to me, that makes perfect sense because you don't think you can actually win the lottery. It is something that is not something you expect. And so your brain is not putting forth the solution focused part of it and then you taking an actionable step to make it happen. You can't win the lottery without buying a lottery
Right.
ticket,
Right.
but you're not going to buy the lottery ticket because if you don't think you're going to win.
Right.
And so it's the same sort of thing. Like I would then that's great if someone can imagine their life as a billionaire. I would want to go further and understand why. What is the purpose? What are they going to gain out of their life truly with that, and how much better is their life going to be or different their life going to be than what they currently have. And then past that, do they actually expect that can happen for them?
Mm.
And if they do, then great. Then we have a really great place to start from. And when you expect it to happen, then you start putting your brain starts coming up with solutions, and you put yourself in scenarios or places or, on a path that can actually actionably work towards that. This
Oh,
takes work.
interesting.
This is not
So is
a
this
ask for it and fall in your
something,
lap.
if you're doing sensory visualization, do you do it every day? Do you do it a couple times a
Mhm.
day? Do you spend time in that space?
Yeah.
Like, is there science or is there any structure to
Mhm.
like how much, how often, how frequently to
Yes.
change your brain?
Yes.
So
Yes, and the true sort of the caveat or the main thing there is that all has to be believable. It doesn't mean that when you're, thinking about things, you have to be like exactly how things are today. You can dream, and you should have lofty goals as well. Big, big lofty goals. But as long as you believe that you're in the business of like being someone that deserves that or
mm-hmm.
can get that
Mm-hmm.
or will get that. And the thing is, you don't have to know how or when. That stuff comes if you truly believe that it's possible. You make that way, and you have to understand that it takes work.
So interesting to me. Are some brains not, I don't want to say capable, but are some brains born more pre-wired for negativity and more resistant to optimism than others?
Great question. I think a lot of people, go through life thinking, well, I was born a pessimist, or I've always been an optimist, or I'm pessimistic because my mom and dad XYZ, or my grandma,
Right.
or culturally,
Right.
and yes, there is a genetic component, there is a
There is.
heritability
Okay.
part of it, but the good news is it's actually much lower than I was thinking. It varies in research, and the most I've ever seen is 25%.
Mm.
So the majority is actually a learned process. So you can learn like a muscle, you can work it out, you can learn to be more optimistic, which is amazing.
Yeah. And is that again something that someone has to be conscious of? Like if
Mhm.
they've modeled negative, pessimistic
Mhm.
behavior,
Yes.
victim
Yep.
behavior, those type of things over a long period of
Mhm.
time, what can they realistically expect in terms of doing this work and seeing a change?
I am such a big believer, again, on measurable,
Yeah.
and coming
Yeah.
from my CBT background,
Yeah.
I believe in big, lofty goals and small, attainable, reachable goals. And when I see people in more of a traditional practice. I don't call it therapy, I call it self-worth work,
Mm.
um, which I feel like is a good way of understanding that you're here and your purpose, you're here because your purpose is you believe in yourself, you're worth it, and you're willing to do the work. So there's like a accountability and a purpose behind it where
Gotcha.
you're choosing yourself, and
Yeah.
that's why I call it self-worth work. But I truly believe that between 3 and 6 months, like, real change
Happens.
happens and can happen
That's
and should
incredible.
happen. I mean, it's small, but your brain, in order to get to the bigger stuff, it takes these small steps, and once you have these new evidence to kind of build in, so, the best example is sort of like, I'm not here to disprove your negative core belief today. I don't even want to. I actually wanna validate to you why you have this core belief. I totally get it. You've, worked on this belief for 30 plus years.
Mhm.
You've collected all this evidence. I'm not gonna be here to tell you that you need to take that belief and chuck it out the window.
Right.
That would be, like, very invalidating. And so let's leave that belief right here. I know you still hold on to it, but let's start to look at, so let's say that core belief is, I don't like myself. I do not like myself. I don't feel like I'm a deserving person of love. Um, and I'm going to hold that belief. And here's all the examples why. I might ask that person, like, if you could just think of one thing that you just sort of like about yourself, just one thing. Doesn't mean you're taking that belief. Like, you could still hold that belief, and I get it. There's got to just be one thing that you kind of like about yourself. And sometimes it's a struggle for people. Other
Right.
people, even though they hold this belief, can be like, well, I guess I like that I'm a loyal friend. I think I'm a good friend. Or, and then I might ask them, like, why do you think you're a good friend? And then they might come up with, examples of, you know, I I'm always there for my friend. My friend called me last week with a problem and I listened, or my friend needed a ride the other day and I was there. So they have some examples of why. And so
Right.
that is true. 1 out of 10, how much do you believe you're a good friend? 9, 8. Okay, great. So I'd rather them focus on that. That's their affirmation to me. It's
Mm.
not, I love myself. I'm a good person. It's, I'm a good friend.
So specific.
It's very specific. It's believable.
Yeah.
And once you say that in front of the mirror 3 times, I'm a good friend,
Yeah.
your brain is like, yeah, you are a good friend. And it starts to look and soften and open up to other sort of like examples. And then you might be like, I like the way I tell a story,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm actually really smart, or I'm a great reader. And you start coming up with all these things. So maybe now after a couple of weeks, you might have like 15 things that in your mind were not groundbreaking, but they are examples of things you like about
Is
yourself.
that collecting evidence?
It's collecting evidence
Mhm.
and it's disproving. So you may not be able to chuck that belief or to change it. You may not be able to flip it and say, I love myself, which most people will tell you when you say, oh, wow, we've identified your core belief is you don't really like yourself. I want you to stand in front of the mirror and say, I love myself 3 times before going to bed. That's what most people will tell you to do,
Right.
which
Right.
is honestly not a good way to go. But after doing the other thing we said and really truly saying, I'm a good friend, I'm a great storyteller, um, I'm a great cook, whatever it is, I love my smile, whatever it is, these, range of things, maybe we have 15. I might look at them and be like, well, you may not be able to say you love yourself right now, but it's pretty hard to say that you don't like anything about yourself
Right.
because you just named 15 things. So they're like, hmm. So it's sort of like you're at the same time of collecting evidence to try to go to the direction of believing what you want to believe. You may not be there yet, but at the same time, you're sort of just dismantling this other thing that you've worked on for so long that actually may not be true. So
I
it,
love that. Well, it sounds so hopeful for so many
yeah,
that, and again, I think what it does, it undoes this whole like affirmations. I said
yes,
that whole
yeah,
culture, toxic
yes.
positivity. I know you probably have an issue with toxic positivity.
I do. I honestly, I understand it and I have a lot of empathy for it because I think a lot of times when you are acting on toxic positivity, whether it's talking to yourself or others or your friends or loved ones are talking to you, I truly believe 90% of the time it comes from good intention. The intention is just that we as humans are so uncomfortable by negative emotion. We don't want someone to feel bad. We don't want to be around for it because what
Right.
that might bring up for ourselves.
Right.
But we also just don't know what to do with it. And so we sort of, from good intention, we want to help and fix whatever's going on. And I will say 9 times out of 10, when someone comes to you with something that they're really struggling with, they're not actually looking for a solution. They're looking to be heard.
Mm.
They're looking to be met. They're looking to sort of have a safe space to just vent. They're looking for safety.
So toxic positivity doesn't allow for that.
No,
It doesn't allow for vulnerability or
no,
trust
no, it
or
doesn't allow for intimacy
intimacy.
or real connection. And I think that the thing about toxic positivity is what bothers me is it is actually the vilification of the human range of emotions. And
Mm.
we as humans were built to experience the full range of emotion, even the ones that don't feel good.
Right.
Like we were meant to have anger, sadness, fear, stress, worry, rage, sometimes mourning, grief. All of these things are normal human emotions. They're part of our human range of emotion. And toxic positivity kind of just says, like, there's no space for that. That can't exist. And you're sort of up against a wall because
Hmm.
no human is able to experience just the positive range of emotion. They may be able, the goal is to be able to navigate through all the emotions,
Not
but
to
not
suppress. It's just as
exactly,
bad as emotional suppression in a way.
exactly,
Interesting.
entirely.
Well, you also talk, I think, in the book, if I'm correct, you talk about awe, the
Hmm.
importance of awe,
Yeah,
right? Talk
that's
to us.
another great tool.
Yeah, talk to us about that. I love these tools. They're
Uh,
amazing. So talk to us about the role of awe in creating the key core pieces of uh
yeah,
optimism, right? Which are resilience and curiosity.
yes. So, awe actually works as sort of this antidote for anxiety
Hmm.
and depression. So, the reason and there was like this study that I thought was so interesting, and the way that they sort of came about understanding that awe could be this tool was they were looking at astronauts. And if you can imagine being an astronaut, no matter how much you train for it, is probably a pretty stressful and anxious, anxiety producing type of profession. You're in this rocket, which
Mhm.
seems quite small. You're going to space. And no matter probably if you've been there before or not, it's exciting and it's
Yeah.
something drew you to it, but it's
Right.
also kind of scary
Yeah. A little.
and yeah, a little bit and claustrophobic even and all the things. And what they found was when these astronauts were up in space, like something was protective, something was protecting that. And it was like, can you imagine anything more awesome or awe-inducing than seeing
Mhm.
space?
Mhm.
Like, I can't even fathom that. And so, this idea of being in a state of awe is being in a state where you are a very small part of something much bigger. And so it's being truly inspired and sort of taken aback emotionally and cognitively by something, and at the same time feeling a very small part of something much larger. And
Hmm.
so when you think about that, it especially for someone going through more depressive like symptoms, a lot of times that's the opposite. Your feelings and emotions and what you're struggling with is at the forefront. It's you're just thinking about that. And if you were able to step away a little bit and feel like you're part of something bigger and that the you is very small, but you're part of something much bigger and you're being inspired by it. It could be a piece of beautiful music, it could transcend you. It could be being in nature, looking at art, listening to someone you really admire speak or whatever that is, or going to space.
Yeah.
Putting yourself in these intentional moments of awe are really protective from an anxiety standpoint, from a depressive standpoint. And it sort of, again, helps you feel as part of something bigger, larger, part of a larger community. And you're not focusing on your very pervasive
Like right here.
yes,
Yeah.
worry.
Yeah.
And, for me, I think what is interesting is you don't have to go to space or obviously be in the middle of the redwoods or something like that to feel awe. You can even I like to think of it sometimes as, like, I use my Pinterest for it sometimes or the save button on, social media. When I see something like a beautiful image of somewhere I've never been or something I love the idea of neuroaesthetics. I
Mhm.
study that a lot, but it could be a texture, it could be a color, it could be, some type of interior, that really, like, speaks to you. For me, music is my,
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
my number one tool. It always has been since I was a kid. I'm super moved by music. I'm one of those people that can get the goosebumps, like,
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah.
But all these are things that can put you in a moment in awe. And so collecting some of these things to intentionally, like, what are the things that put you in awe? Start collecting that, write that down, start adding them to your day.
Mm.
Like when you want to have a cup of coffee at 4, either with it or instead of it, like do some awe, like
Awe is a
intentionally
tool.
awe is a
I
tool.
love
Yeah,
that.
go
Yeah.
microdose on some
Go
awe.
microdose awe. I wish we
Yeah.
could bottle that,
I
right? Here
know.
you go.
I
Take
know.
that.
Yeah.
What's the 12-second rule?
So this actually has come from a lot of research I've seen, but mainly a neuroscientist who came on my podcast, Dr. Hansen. He came in and taught me this idea of the 12-second rule, and it's amazing. It's about holding a positive memory or image or idea in your brain for just 12 seconds.
Mm.
Like, it's enough for your brain to actually really marinate in it and then wire itself to look for something else positive.
Mm.
So, it's a practice that's simple. It's 12 seconds, but the funny thing is, you think about that and it's 12 seconds, but it's so counter to what we automatically do as humans. We are so much more likely to spend without intention more than 12 seconds on something that didn't go right,
Yeah.
something that we want to do better at or something really bad that happened. And we very rarely take something like joy, a feeling of joy, or some sort of positive memory or mood. We often remember our memories of things that didn't go right for us or mistakes we made or accidents or things like that. If you think back to your childhood, those memories really stick out. It's the like small sort of happy, joyful memories that just worked out that are gone.
Mm.
And so your brain's like, I don't need to hold on to this because I'm not doing anything with it. But what we've learned is it's very powerful for this type of practice to actually hold on to those things intentionally.
Mm.
So the next time you feel a good feeling or you have a flash of a memory that's positive, try to challenge yourself, put a timer on for 12
12
seconds and try
seconds.
to like stay in it.
Oh, I love these tools. All right, let's do one
Okay.
more. I love all of them. Adult version of I Spy.
Mm.
What in the world? What's going on there?
This actually came from my work as a grad student when I was in the psycho-oncology program, and it worked so well for anxiety, and, uh, although I don't have a diagnosable anxiety
Right,
condition,
right.
I think we all sort of veer towards these different almost diagnoses because that's what diagnoses are. There are normal emotions just sort of taken to another level that might be pervasive. I'm definitely someone that can err on the side of anxiety, and that has gone up since I have had children,
Mm,
for
mhm,
sure.
mhm.
Um, this works
I think a
so
lot of
well.
moms
Yes,
go through that for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
And it's actually something that has stuck around for me
Mm.
through all of I mean, I just think that's the state that I'm sort of in. I have more work cut out for myself now, but an anxious state, worry has really like seeped in a bigger way than it ever has since I've become a mom.
Mm.
And yeah, I think that is common with a lot of mothers and parents in general. I think for my husband too, more so for me. But the adult I Spy game is so great. So the basis of it is that you, all of us, have a limited attentional capacity. I think we go around the world thinking we just have like an unlimited amount of like time and energy that our brain can focus on things, but actually it's a limited attentional capacity. And that's important because when you're doing some of this work intentionally, you can actually tell your brain in some scenarios when you're being intentional what you want it to focus on. And you can utilize enough of the attentional capacity that it actually cannot focus on whatever the worry was or the loop or the rumination you were doing before. So, where this came up was some of my patients pre surgery and right before they were going into surgery, they would have a lot of anticipatory anxiety, and, like, literally, I'd be standing with some of them as they were being wheeled, and I would be like, "Okay, let's play a game. I want you to look around the room, and I want you to, without any judgment, without telling a story, I want you to just name out loud everything that you see. Do it for 30 seconds." And so it
Mhm.
might just be like, "I see a green plant. I see white curtains, I see a book," and then your brain might go like, "I wonder what that book is. That book reminds me," and then you stop yourself and you're like, "Wait, I'm not
Mhm.
telling a story.
Mhm.
Move on." I see a cup, I see an orange vase, and you keep going on. And what we know about the brain is if you see something and then you label it in your brain and then you label it out loud, it's utilizing enough attentional capacity where you have put a break or a pause in what you were ruminating about before. So it's like a
Yeah.
healthy distraction game.
Got it.
And when you're done with it, you might go back to your worries, but it's sort of taken the potency out and it acts as like a reset button. So I use that a lot for some clients that are, prone to panic,
Yeah.
just anxiety and worry in general, or ruminating over something like loop. And we
Mhm.
all sort of do that at
Right,
times. So
right. Yeah.
it's just a reset. It's a really
A
fun,
quick
a
way to
quick,
reset.
simple, healthy distraction technique.
Oh my gosh, I love all these tools, and I have so much more I wanna ask you about. What can we expect in your book, The Power of Real Optimism? Talk to us about that.
Everything that we just talked about and more.
Ah,
No.
I want
Real
it.
optimism, the reason I wrote this book is actually not because I'm the most optimistic person. I actually wrote this book because I'm not.
Mm,
So, I'm known as the Optimism Doctor, but I'm very transparent to share. I'm not the most naturally optimistic person, and probably in my, like, small microcosm of family, I probably rate the lowest,
really?
on optimism, but I am just like everybody else in the trenches using the tools and science. I love science. And my sort of passion is taking science and putting that into everyday, practical, actionable tools that make sense for real humans living a real life. And so it is packed with those type of things that are science-based and the tools, and I think that the important piece that with this book is it's really to send out the message that no one is immune to struggle. This book is not about manifesting a life of 24/7 bliss.
Right.
It's actually about meeting you where you seriously are at in the moment. It's real optimism techniques for real people living real lives today
Mm.
with everything in between it, and especially when times are hard.
What do you hope this book will do?
I hope that this book will my big thing when I work with clients is what I've always been passionate about is I think after every session, it kind of became an obsession for me that I wanted after every session for someone to have an aha moment in their life, in their daily life, or something that they like, something that could connect, something they learned in the science that they could be like, whoa, like, yes, I can illustrate that in my mind. And I wanted them to walk away with a tool every session that they could then do that following week without having to do anything with me. So it's self mastery.
Mm.
And then they could collect both of those things every week. And that's always what I've been passionate about. And that's what I hope from this book is that you walk away with not just one or two, but many, many tools that you can revisit and continuously keep getting more tools from no matter what point you are in your life, what season you're in, whether it's a tough one or, you're smooth sailing for now because everything is seasons and everything's temporary. And I hope that by the end of the book, everybody is able to sort of relax their shoulders down and say like, wow, I'm actually more optimistic than I thought I was.
Oh, I love that. All right, final question for today. A, I want the book. But B, what makes you whole?
Ooh, what makes me whole? I think for me, an answer to this would have been different in different sort of seasons in my life. But right now, I think what truly makes me feel whole is when I feel connected to my sense of purpose.
Mm.
And not just in an existential level, but like I like to really practice seasonally the sort of exercise of like what my purpose is right now and allowing myself for that to change. And as long as I'm living a life, which by the way, does not have to mean that every single thing you do, like what you do for a living, what you're paid for, sometimes we don't have control over those things and we have obligations and we have mouths to feed and whatever
Right.
that is that might
Right.
not translate. But if everything in some way is related back to sort of what my purpose is right
Mm.
now, and I know what my purpose is, then
Wait,
I
what's your
feel whole.
purpose?
So it's interesting. I literally just did I take clients through this practice called ikigai.
Yeah.
It's a
Uh-huh.
Japanese
Yep.
from
Uh-huh.
Okinawa,
Yeah.
and it's in the book, if you wanna know how to do it, but it is an ancient Okinawan practice that helps you understand why you get out of bed every day.
Right.
And there's tons of research to show why that's important to live an optimal life is to know that. The interesting thing that just I saw the other day, research-wise, was we know that about, like, adults, but there was this study done that it's equally, if not more important for teens to understand what their purpose is.
Mm.
And when is the last time we talked to our teens about what their purpose
Right.
was? But
Right.
it's so protective from a proactive mental health standpoint to understand what your purpose is.
Mm.
Mine right now is to inspire.
To inspire. Well,
Yeah.
I feel inspired today. So your purpose is accomplished. It's in action for sure. No, I feel truly inspired by this. I think it's so hopeful. I think at a micro level for people that are stuck,
Yeah.
right? It's practical little tools
Yes.
to help move them forward. At a macro level, our hospitals,
Mhm.
our exam rooms,
Yes.
even our own clinics, like where can we put some of this into place when people are finding themselves in situations or positions that are fearful,
Yep.
anxiety provoking, or may move them towards a more negative space. So I think there's so much
Mhm.
opportunity for this. I can't wait to see how everybody resonates with
I
it
can't wait for
once
you to
it's
read it.
out.
Yeah,
I
it's out
know.
on
I know.
March 10th.
March 10th.
Yep.
Okay. Everywhere books are sold.
Everywhere books are sold.
Okay. And it's available for pre order.
It's available for pre-order now,
Okay.
and it's available March 10th. All right, real optimism, the power of real optimism, lots of great practical tools. I think all of us could be better and learn more by practicing some of these. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode and that you are going to practice optimism moving forward. And we'll share this episode with the people that you love. I'll see you next time.
Take a breath before you go. Your body's always guiding you. And if you want to understand it even better, watch the next episode on your screen. And while you're at it, subscribe so you don't miss any of the conversations that bring science and spirit together.